All right, we're going to get started. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 6:30. You don't have the drill? The long bit? All right, I'd like to start by going over the minutes from the May 15th meeting. There were some edits made, just kind of clarified the topics that were discussed.
Hey, Julie.
Everyone get a chance to look at them? Any questions or comments? Amended changes, 23rd?
No.
Lily's.
Just had me listed as council person.
Okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Lily's comments were updated in there, right?
Yes, they were. Well, she has you as a task force member, so that's accurate, Julia.
No, on May
it was-
22nd.
Maybe it was
one.
the 22nd. That
Yeah.
was-
Oh, on May
22nd.
22nd.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Promoted.
Demoted, duly noted.
Point of view of this.
Yes.
Would be accurate.
Accept.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The minutes from both the 23rd and the 22nd or 15th, sorry. Okay. Okay, the most recent comments from the public have all been emailed to you. They really just kind of referred to that environmental chapter that we had discussed before.
I continue to be extraordinarily impressed that people wade through this and take the time to put comments in.
Some really thoughtful stuff in there.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
In order to honor that, what exactly, so we're just bundling this all and sending it off to our
So-
consultants, and they're going to weed through it and
Yeah, because
parse
the way,
out good stuff, or what, how is this? Did we give them a directive about that? That's what I'm concerned about, that this information isn't just gonna be, okay, nice comment, and just go on.
so what we're doing is when all the comments come in, they come into an Excel spreadsheet. So we sort them by chapter. And we're making notes on the comments that have already been incorporated, because a lot of the chapters, we did take those comments into consideration. And then for any of the newer chapters, like the environmental chapter, the housing chapter, I'm noting where they go in the chapter and what they refer to, so that when the consultants look at it, they know, oh, okay, this refers to this section, and mostly action items that they correspond to, and whether we discussed it during the meeting or not. That way, when the consultants look at it, they know, oh, okay, the committee looked at it and their comments have already been taken into consideration. Things like that. If it's kind of an organizational note, I leave that there for them to look at and see if it applies.
Some of them are actually just comments about what's going on.
Right.
And it may not be actually appropriate to any given section, but
Right.
how do you plan to direct them as far as what they do with that?
Well, that's kind of a commentary on how the consultants are, well, I think the consultants are going to take that into account when they figure out how to engage the public. You know, take those comments into consideration, see if there's something that people are asking for that they're not getting right now, and try to do that moving forward. So these are like the last two chapters of just raw information that we're giving the consultants so they can put the draft together. Once the draft's together, we're going to give them the wheel and they're going to steer the rest of this. So once that happens, then they're going to be the ones that kind of help figure out what's the best way to interact with the public, what's the best way to get the information out. And so those comments are going to be helpful for them, figuring out how to do that. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the housing chapter. When BJ and I were looking at it, we realized a lot of the action items were sort of duplicates of what was in the community housing plan. And so we spoke to the consultants and we asked if that's the way it's typically done, is if the comp plan kind of reflects the housing plan, because New York State says you have to include your housing plan in your comp plan. But we weren't sure how much like overlap or how much repetition there should be. And they said that because the housing plan is sort of a separate addendum to the comp plan, that you should kind of incorporate those concepts into the plan itself, because people may not go and read the housing plan, but they'll read the comp plan. So what we asked them to do is look over the recommendations made in the housing plan and the recommendations that we had in the housing chapter. And they also looked over the land use and zoning chapter that we have and just try to see what topics we should be discussing. And so what they did was they took the prior goals that we had and then they sort of fleshed them out and highlighted talking points that we should discuss. So these are very, very, very rough drafts based on what was already in there. And they thought that, and they were also the important talking points that we as a committee need to discuss and sort out how we want to use them or if we want to use them. So they did take some of the things that had been in the land use and zoning chapter and incorporated them here because they involved housing. So one of them, so what I'm going to work off of is the document that we sent you.
Admittedly late and apologize.
Goals and recommendations.
That's one. The housing recommendations, goals and recommendations, the revised version. So they kind of incorporated everything that we've given them so far and moved some bits around a little bit. Coco, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. So. Wait for it to load. Here we go. So the first page of this was all the goals that we had written. So I'm going to go down so you can see. So a lot of these are from the housing plan. So the prior goals and objectives as we had them written, the first one was to assure that a supply of affordable housing on Shelter Island exists over time adequate to serve the diversity of the island's population, and that any new housing be developed in a manner harmonious with the island environment. The second one was create and maintain affordable housing opportunities for the diversity of age and income groups that make up Shelter Island's year-round population. Assure that new housing construction or conversions of existing housing will be carried out in harmony with the environment, with the supply and quality of natural resources, and with the particular style and character of Shelter Island's existing housing and traditional development pattern. And then the third one was assure that creation of affordable housing is undertaken with minimal impact of Shelter Island taxpayers.
I've just a general comment. I think number 2 includes number 1. It just is, it's a little redundant, just
Yeah.
to say, probably we'll pass that on as a comment.
Yeah, so these are the ones we had, and then we'll get into the ones that they provided us to discuss. Some of the prior action items we had were establish code and policy regarding the development of accessory dwelling units through the use of grants, low interest loans, code amendments, and enforcement. Update the existing town code to ensure that it is consistent with the goal of increasing year-round community housing opportunities. Develop educational materials and resources to assist and educate homeowners in the process of developing accessory dwelling units on their property.
Bless you.
Establish funding sources for homeowners to develop year-round accessory dwelling units. Explore a community land trust model to maintain affordable housing in perpetuity. Target outreach to seniors on the island to understand the needs of this growing population. Establish a low-interest loan program for first-time home buyers. Construct a maximum of 2 year-round rental units at 69 North Ferry Road. Construct a maximum of 8 year-round rental units at 12 South Ferry Road. Monitor the effectiveness of short-term rental law and make necessary code adjustments to increase enforcement ability and renter safety. Evaluate regulations for homes exceeding 6,000 SFLA and determine standards for appropriateness of building size versus lot size and type. So that was what we had based on the housing plan and some of the things that had come up in the community, like the large home construction, the special permit applications.
I noticed there was a comment that they thought that 8 was not enough units on that property to financially interest someone who wanted to do a development there. 12 or more would be better.
Right.
We're not wedded to that number specifically? Okay.
No, 8 is what should be allowed by the health department based on the size of the property.
Okay.
But you could always
big is it?
apply for a variance of 4 acres. So, you could apply for a variance if we can meet the septic well requirements, that kind of thing.
Now, has the soil been tested there? That was an issue.
Yes,
It's not, we did test it, it's fine.
It's
It's clean,
fine.
yeah.
That was a concern community members were expressing.
Yeah, and the town is currently talking to the health department about what would be allowed and what style, because, maybe it would be nice to not do the, 4 separate acres, 2 units per acre. Maybe it would be nice to cluster it and have more open space. So it's discussions are happening, yeah.
Just general question, is that level of detail necessary and required in this level document? Like, are we setting numbers in the comprehensive plan, or is that something that is in the housing plan that figures out exactly how many we need at
Right.
the site?
Those were in the housing plan.
Yeah, I know they're in the housing
So-
plan, so is it redundant? Does it belong in the housing
Or
plan?
can we say per the housing plan?
Right, I'm just not sure the
Yeah.
right place for where are we setting that number?
I agree, if we could
We
get
set the-
10,
we
would
set
take
the
it?
overall goal of, we'll get into the goals.
Right.
And then the housing plan is that path
Yeah.
forward on how to actually achieve those goals.
Right.
So I think you're right. I think that the number itself should stay in the housing plan and the overall goal is kind of what we're establishing. They do address it kind of more directly in this next section, goals and recommendations revised. So this is what the consultants have given us based off of what we gave them. The first goal is to preserve the quality and character of existing single-family residential zones and other residential neighborhoods. So this is a topic for discussion that they said has come up in a number of places where they've done this kind of project. Establish a limit on the size of a knockdown house. So a knockdown home, which involves demolishing the existing structures and rebuilding new ones in their place, can be a serious issue. The building of new homes, which tend to maximize building envelopes on their property, can raise several concerns, including loss of architectural heritage. Demolishing older homes can erase valuable elements of Shelter Island's cultural and architectural history. Neighborhood character and aesthetics. Knockdown homes can impact the overall character and aesthetics of a neighborhood. If new construction is significantly larger or visually incompatible with the surrounding older and more modest homes, it can disrupt the established architectural style and create a sense of visual imbalance or discord. Displacement and affordability. Knockdown homes can contribute to gentrification and housing affordability issues. In some cases, older homes targeted for demolition may have been more affordable options for residents. Replacing them with larger, more expensive homes can drive up property values and potentially displace lower income residents from the area. Impact from construction. The demolition process of knockdown homes can generate a significant amount of waste, including construction debris, hazardous materials, and other pollutants. Noise, dust, increased traffic, and construction-related activities may also impact the quality of life of those living nearby, especially if the construction process is prolonged. To address these concerns, Shelter Island should consider regulations or design guidelines to mitigate the negative impacts of knockdowns. This could include linking the coverage of a replacement house to the size of the house being removed. Size of the replacement house could also be linked to the relative size of neighboring houses.
That's a whole new idea.
I got so excited. First, really new idea.
Yeah,
that we-
exactly,
Yeah.
since the housing plan.
Yeah.
And he further states, no, we'll provide more detailed look at size controls related to houses. But I want to know if this is a non-starter not I want to know. It would be good to know if this is a non-starter from the get-go, or is this something that we think that the island would entertain as we get out there and get more feedback? Is such an idea. Limiting, knockdown replacements.
To catch 22.
I was just gonna say that, because I see a lot of potential complications with it. I think conceptually it's interesting, but, if I'm just purchased a home
Right.
and my home may be worthy of a demolition, I don't want to be told that now I can't build something that's compliant in that area
Right.
just because the home that was there was small.
Yeah.
If it,
Or devil's advocate, it's a rundown house
right,
in an otherwise nicer spot area,
Right.
it would be an improvement. Just to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, I
There are,
agree.
I'm sure many other scenarios I mean, I think it needs to be fleshed out.
I'd like to
Maybe
know what
there's some-
other places have
How have they
entertained this, yeah.
Yeah, there's some other examples, and there may be some other regulations or policies that may make this one not as necessary. You know,
Yeah,
down the road, if we talk about, you know, there's certain restrictions
on size in
square
general,
footage and
yeah.
development and near shore overlay, this might kind of become a non-issue, or it could be, you
Right.
know, a good addition depending the.
Yeah, not to be a cynic, but I feel like this horse left the barn.
Right.
That that we've already gone pretty far down in terms of transforming neighborhoods and blocks and streets.
I'll
With,
tell you, this first came up back when we did the culture chapter.
yes.
And we talked about trying to maintain the historical houses and, you know, that kind of floating H zone idea, which wasn't necessarily a mandate, more than trying to educate people and enrolling into that.
Yeah.
And showing them the incentives of doing that. There was a historical house that was knocked down. There's a lot of public, uproar about,
Yeah.
Plus the efficiencies you get with a new house too.
There's a lot of energy efficiencies.
Energy efficiencies and the waste produced by, you know, but I mean, some of that waste is also good waste. I mean, you know, it's lead
We're
paint, you
putting
know, get rid of
in AI
it.
systems and all those upgrades that
Yeah.
go along with everything.
Right, low flows.
I agree with Joanne. I'd like to see what some other towns have, if it's worked.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
all right, note for them. And you know, like you said, once, kind of sorts out the moratorium and how to handle. Where am I going?
Some of this I see as a, what do I say, subjective. You know, and I think people have a problem with that in general, so it's kind of is key to see how is it implemented other places.
I mean, just off the top of my head, I don't know all of them, but the first 3 knockdown houses I can think of are all in the near shore overlay.
Yeah,
Right,
Maybe that's just my subjective, what I've seen, but
but I think as we get a decade in from here, I think you're gonna see the center transforming. I mean, do you know, I mean, it's not gonna stop when the near shore overlay is completely done. I don't think.
the next one I had was address issue of illegal conversions. So in the building code as written, unfinished areas in the home such as unfinished basements or attic areas do not count towards the permitted gross square footage. It's understood that on occasion, individuals proceed to finish unfinished areas after their applications are approved. This practice is commonly known as illegal conversions or unpermitted renovations, and it has been a means to bypass certain building regulations, zoning laws, or safety standards that are in place to ensure the habitability and safety of residential properties. To address this, the town should evaluate zoning requirements and permitting processes to reduce the incentive or ability for property owners to gain approval for a dwelling that does not meet the necessary standards. One method would be to count a portion of the basement or attic area as part of the allowable square footage for a given parcel, regardless of whether they are finished or not. So this kind of comes back to my recommendation of permitting all the square footage and the structure with the original application. And then even if you finish it later, you just need a building permit.
Yeah.
A special permit or an area variance or however it settles out. I don't know if they've,
What's the difference if you finish it for sleeping quarters or bathrooms or if you just have open space for pool table?
well, right now, and it's because of the way the code is written right now, we calculate the square footage as only as habitable space. So when you calculate that for a special permit, or some of these other applications, it's only that finished habitable space that's being counted. So you get people who build a home that's 5,998 square feet, but then they do a 3-car garage that's another, 2,400 square feet, but it's unfinished, and then they go in and they finish it later. So then they haven't done the special permit process. They illegally finished it because they didn't get a permit because they didn't want to have to go back for the special permit. So to kind of close that loophole, if we just permit all the square footage being constructed at the original time of application,
So maybe it's not 6,000 square feet
Yeah,
anymore,
but how are
Jay.
you gonna figure that out for bathrooms?
We're not.
Oh, yeah, you have to if you're gonna work on the square footage. Because if you're telling me you could convert your three-car garage into sleeping quarters, now your septic system's gonna be in violation.
You still need a building permit in the future. If you built your house, you built your 3-car garage with the second story that's left, unfinished storage space. And in 5 years, you're gonna finish it, let's just say, you still should get a building permit. And that still should,
But would that mean that when you do your application, you would be jumped up to a SEN 7, let's say,
yeah,
and you wouldn't be eligible anymore for the SEN 5? You'd have to go right for the more.
So most people, if they're
And
going,
assuming more square footage in the whole original.
if you're gonna do this kind of, so that's health department. So the health department will size the sanitary based on the number of bedrooms in the structure or the number of potential bedrooms, depending on how you're organizing things. Most people, if they have intention to finish something off later on, they'll plan ahead and they'll count for those extra potential bedrooms in the original design process. So they might present to you a home with 4 bedrooms, but then they have this unfinished garage. And so all of a sudden they're getting a system that's sized for 6 bedrooms because they're anticipating in the future finishing that garage. So most people will pre-design that portion of it. Or when they do it, then they have to upgrade. Because if the health department finds out, the health department will make sure they're compliant.
Make them anywhere, okay.
yeah, so
Yeah,
if it's all space and it's maximum of, let's just say we changed the maximum, it's just the all space 10,000, except garages, but above garages, all space, then there would be, it's sort of, you've already gotten, there's no need then for the special permit. There's no need for you to evade the law and the expense of the special permit. You've already been permitted for a structure that big. Finishing it off would, I think, the idea is to merely require a building permit.
Just so that you know that you have your proper egress, you have your smoke detectors, you have all the safety requirements.
Huge problem, and I think it needs to be addressed immediately. If we can.
Because we've had it happen.
This idea of people sneaking the,
No, it is commonplace, and, certain people who, apply for the permits know the game, and they know exactly what they're doing. It's not like a one-off thing. It's,
Yeah.
don't put a stove in until after you get your CO, if you even get one, and
right.
then you can do whatever you want. Is this something that could be fixed just with enforcement currently?
Yeah, some of it,
Some of it, but
some of it.
yeah, but you'd have to have, that's harder. Enforcement is harder because you have to have probable cause, I guess. I'm talking to you. You should
You
tell
need
me.
a reason. You need a reason.
Right, to go in.
You can't just
and-
randomly invade
yeah.
someone's home and be like, do you have a stove?
No,
Doesn't
but
go
I mean,
over
when they're finishing it off,
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
Right.
there's your
Yeah.
cause right there.
But if you say this ahead of time, maybe not a stove, because,
That was just one example of,
Yeah.
But it's the
whole
more
work.
significant issues that we're looking at is when they convert an entire structure. that was
Well, you
supposed
look
to be
at some current
uninhabitable.
projects, you
Yeah.
have 5, right under the 6,000, and then you're adding another 6,000 worth of unfinished space.
Right, or seasonal pool house, or whatever you can call it. Yeah, that's not, yeah, exactly. And we just had it on Ram Island where that was an illegal basement conversion. And if it had been done honorably from the get-go by the prior owner, it would have cost some money. To get the special permit at that time, and that guy did need to upgrade the septic to make that. So anyway,
And they also
yeah,
had to, there was also safety issues. You had to make sure there was proper egress, like the doors were the appropriate size. So there were things that would have been addressed in the original building permit if it had been applied for.
Right.
So to close loopholes like that, this is an option.
open
It's
them.
an overall square footage.
Right.
Yeah.
But it also may not be necessary once the moratorium questions are sorted out. Because the board is currently looking at how to calculate square footage, how other places do it. So hopefully, sort of. Slow down. Strengthen limits and density in residentially zoned areas. So existing zoning regulations regulate housing density, which depending on the district is either 1 acre per unit, so 1 acre zoning, or half acres per unit, 2 acre zoning. It is widely understood that building
I think that's a typo.
I do too. That building sanitary sewers will help to improve water quality by managing and treating wastewater. While this infrastructure would help to address water quality, some residents have expressed serious concern that the built infrastructure would eventually lead to additional density. It's important to affirmatively state that if public sewers are built, the residential density of existing residentially zoned areas should be maintained and should never exceed 2 units per acre. This would not include rebuilding homes in kind on existing small lots. This also does not preclude the use of cluster subdivisions where houses or buildings are grouped together on smaller lots, leaving larger open portions of the land undeveloped as open space. While cluster subdivisions may have smaller individual lots, the overall density of the development is not significantly increased. If public sewers are built, it may be reasonable to consider limited locations in business zones where additional housing types and densities may be appropriate. A limited amount of housing in business areas would help to support existing businesses and provide more housing opportunities on the island. Engaging in open dialogue, providing accurate information about the benefits and potential impacts, and incorporating community feedback into planning and decision-making processes can help alleviate concerns and ensure that any changes in residential density in business areas with the addition of public sewer systems are implemented in a manner that benefits the community as a whole.
Just going to add here, public sewer and water, and/or water, I think should be in this paragraph.
So when we talk about residentially zoned, are we talking about business zone at all? Or are we only looking at,
So this talks about two
Residential.
things. So
The last paragraph.
what they're responding to here, I think, are a lot of the comments that we've received against the wastewater treatment project and concerns about increasing density and things of that nature. And so,
That was children.
right, so the first portion of this speaks specifically about residential areas, residential zoning, kind of maintaining that 1 acre, or if there's a pre-existing, lot, there's some half acres lots in the center here, kind of maintaining that zoning for the residential areas. And then it is taking into account the housing plan's recommendation of apartments over businesses. And so in the second portion of this, it recommends that if sewers are built, then it may be appropriate to have increased density in the sense of apartments over businesses in the center with that accommodation for that infrastructure.
I think I'd add a separate header for that one.
Okay,
They come out both separately.
okay. Break out residential from commercial.
I think that's a good idea. It makes it clearer.
Yeah.
And maybe the commercial needs a little bit more detail. Again, nobody's talking 5 stories.
Right,
It needs to be
still
clear
2
that we have,
stories, but
we
you
have our height, we have our height restrictions. And back to this idea too, that we have a number of, gosh, the word is escaping me, non-conforming lots in the center. And that's what that little discourse is there. That's higher density because they're less than an acre. But it's being explicitly stated that those lots can be rebuilt upon. This should not preclude those houses from, those lots from being utilized if they're already being utilized, even though they're substandard. Which I think is an important thing to,
You would put a small house on them, you're saying?
no, one that this is speaking specifically to where it already exists. This
So
would
if
not include rebuilding homes in kind on existing small lots, the less than 1 acre lots.
Right,
Yeah.
it wouldn't eliminate the ability for someone to rebuild on their existing lot.
We've kind of been saying this a lot, I think, during our discussions, that infrastructure is maybe unavoidable from here forward in Shelter Island's future, but it should not be the reason, it should not be the way that development goes crazy here. And if it's stated here that this kind of strongly, which I think it's a pretty strong statement, should help prevent
What
that.
do we do about the undersized lots that are not built on now? That we mentioned that further on the housing report, there's a large number of them. I didn't realize how many empty lots of less than a third of an acre there are.
Those might have,
Or they want to do something with that.
Right.
What are we going to allow them to do?
Some of those could actually trace back to like easements and right of ways and
Right.
things.
I think it would really depend on the lot and whether or not there's CNRs on the deed. But if they can construct something and meet setbacks and it's not, requiring any real exemptions to, codes, then if someone owns a buildable lot, they own a buildable lot.
I was just thinking,
It's about-
tiny homes.
Yeah.
Tiny homes
Because
are-
tiny homes-
You wanna put a tiny home on there, but maybe 2 bedrooms, maximum 2 people, a child or something like that, that's could.
John, are you speaking specifically in the center or just in general?
Wherever
across
they
the
are,
island?
Wherever
there's
they
little
are.
pieces all over the place,
Okay.
you know, you can see them on the map, tax map.
I mean, part of the problem with the smaller lots is maintaining the septic well setbacks.
Right.
So, you know, there are some lots, there's literally a lot in Silver Beach I could think of that is unbuildable because you can't meet the sanitary well setbacks with on the lot or on any of the neighbors' lots, and the, you know, the setbacks overlap. So there's literally no building envelope.
But if there's ever public water down there, then, you know, I think then your setbacks have to become, you know, your way of at least not, you know, because again, the visual, the community character
And your
thing.
setbacks would still overlap.
I'm
You'd still
looking at
have no building envelope.
My
so-
spreadsheet, there's about, John, less than a third of an acre, there's about 92 properties, I think, that I have. That's, you know, that's not to, yeah. But some of them are so tiny, like I'm thinking of those little things on Peconic Avenue, that beach is
they're really
totally
just like
carved up,
beach
that's not, you know,
access,
so a lot of that is this, where people own a little slice of across the way and you could never build there anyway. And it
They're
was-
attached to the properties.
yes, yeah,
They can't be sold separately.
right, and along.
They're attached.
Yeah, along Winthrop, there's a few before you get into Deering Harbor. Even on the causeway, Second Causeway, Chiramonte owns, you know, so some of those are already spoken for, they would never be able.
Those are all sub-county setback requirements anyway, so it's nothing
Right,
we can do to
right.
alter that.
They're really not buildable, a
Yeah.
lot of those smaller spots.
Yeah.
And some of them are owned by the adjacent property. And
Yes.
it's just kind of like an extension of their
Yeah.
property.
You have a lot of examples of them existing though, you know, pre-Suffolk County regulation, I mean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they're very successful right now. I mean, how does that work when they want to upgrade their septic and everything?
You know.
It's pre-existing,
It's
so they're allowed
pre-existing,
to.
so you do a best fit. If you're upgrading your sanitary system, then the amount of nitrates going back in the ground is so significantly less that the county will allow, they'll give you variances most of the time. If you can maintain your existing distance between your neighbor's wells and your sanitary system or improve that distance, then they'll usually approve the septic system.
Yeah. Mine,
Yeah,
yeah, and I have an acre plus, but, yeah, my well was too close, but it was an improvement over what was there.
yeah. They're more likely to let you contaminate your own well than a neighbor's well. That's 100%, I mean, because you're making that choice.
Right.
You know, so the county is more likely to let you contaminate your own well than any neighbor's.
Good to know.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
Yeah.
you know, if you're making that choice and you're asking a variance from yourself, they're not really gonna fight you on it. But how do people feel about this concept of maintaining current zoning standards, even with, you know, public water, public sewer?
This gives strength to
Things
the
that
zoning
were-
code that
Yeah. 'cause
that now is being given by the lack of infrastructure. So how do we bolster the zoning code? Because the comment we hear is, oh, well, you're saying this, but the next administration or the one after that might disagree, might be a developer. You know, and use the fact that we now have public water in the center, let's say, as an excuse to go forward.
The subdivisions, and you can still subdivide down to a smaller lot as long as overall you set aside, you know, the correct proportion of reserved
Right.
land.
So here you could subdivide down to 1 acre zoning, as is our standard.
Right.
So you get hypothetically a 10-acre lot, you know, and get a 5 or 10 or whatever half-acre lots, houses and preserved land. I'm
Well-
just trying to conceptualize.
Cluster.
Well, the
Example.
cluster's different.
Oh, is that different
So-
than what you're saying?
I'm just trying to understand what's
Yeah, so
proposing.
essentially with a cluster, let's say you have, we're gonna go with 10, we have 10 acres, 1 acre zoning. You could probably create 9 lots, because you have to put something away for reserve land, so you have, say 10% or whatever. So, 10 acres, you could have 9 lots, let's say 9 houses. So if you're gonna do cluster, zoning on that 10 acres, now you have 10 acres, you could still do, that's still doing 9 structures, but doing 9 structures maybe on 5 acres and leaving the other
Right.
5 open space.
Right.
So that you still have that open space preserved land, but it's in a more significant chunk, and then you have all the construction clustered in one area, so you're actually disrupting less of the land. So it has
King's
less of an
Cabins or Carter's
impact.
Cabins or something like that, with,
Yeah.
you know, a large preserve next to it.
Exactly.
Where
So
otherwise it would have been spread out.
it would have been spread out, using up
Okay.
the whole space, and then you probably wouldn't really have forest.
But
or whatever.
overall, the same zoning kind of applies. right?
Yes, same kind of application.
Okay.
And that's something that you can kind of do if you have infrastructure. So if you have public water, you could cluster the structures. Whereas if you don't, then you do have to subdivide and you do have to separate wells and
Setbacks, right.
septic setbacks. It's easier to do with infrastructure. So really the argument that people make against, or in this, what we've been hearing, against having the infrastructure of public water and public sewer is that then you can increase your density because you no longer have to meet those health department setbacks of 150 feet between a well and a septic system, which is really what kind of created our 1 acre zoning, was maintaining health department standards.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what gives us the current layout that we have,
Yeah.
just the sprawl.
And in terms of, I mean, how you all feel the community, I think this is community sentiment is what we're nailing here. That, you know, I think there's 2 things now. I think that it's really forefront that potable water, especially in the center, we're going to find out for sure within a couple of months. But, you know, potable water is a need in the center that needs to be addressed, I should say. And yet nobody wants this place to change all that much. So for me, this was crucial we needed the consultants actually to do this in a way that was direct and made the exceptions where the exceptions should be made.
So how do you plug affordable housing into this section?
This is my answer to that, okay? So Fred Thiel said this. When we passed that referendum, and we have now an income stream, which will take a little to get going, that is the way that we are going to be able to afford affordable housing and
Where?
keep our density.
Where?
Where? Well, we're going to start, right now.
The problem is we haven't given where anywhere. We have 8 or 10 bedrooms basically or so that we're looking at, right?
Yeah, we have the old highway, and then we have the lot down here.
Yeah, we have 8 units down there, 2 on 69, and in fact, we're not going to do a wastewater treatment plant, there's 2 more. So that, the housing plan calls for 10.
In Loring?
The housing plan calls for 10 units, that's it. You know, for short term, now short term, where do we go long term? But, you know, hopefully the income stream allows us to buy properties as we go along and develop them not in a high density way, above the stores, you know, kind of easy and doesn't really change the overall look.
Stores.
I know,
When I read this about,
right, it's not going to be the supermarket,
there's what, 4,
right?
5 buildings?
But our needs don't, I mean, what are our needs? I mean,
We're 65 buildings short as of 2020, I think.
well, but
We've lost 65 rental units. Somewhere in there I saw it, and that's now
did?
disappeared from the chart, but we're 65 or 67 buildings short 3 years ago that are gone. Where do they come?
Well, I'm really going from the housing plan that was done and the needs assessment there, which I'm trying to pull up because my memory's not that good. The goals of the housing plan were short-term 10, medium-term, and also work on ADUs, medium-term, continue with that, and perhaps think about purchases as opposed to just rentals. Where it's here. I mean, in the center, it's supposed to be smart development, so it's supposed to be near the services, near the school and the stores. You know, I don't know what to say to you, besides that, you know, we hope we can buy stuff in the future to continue developing. I think the plate's full for the next 5 to 7 years in terms of what could get done. And here, that's the other thing is, you know,
So for-
hopefully with the facilities master plan, we have 3 more units here.
So the highway yard.
Yeah.
Which is actually a pretty busy piece of property.
Yeah.
Where do we place that space?
I don't,
Almost every project that's run on Shelter Island runs through that
Oh, you're
facility.
saying where do we move the things that are currently stored there?
Everything that's there and the staging of major projects that happens on Shelter Island,
right,
where do we place that piece of property?
yeah,
Where is that gonna come from?
yeah. I don't know, why can't it be at the recycling center?
There's just not a lot of space there.
Yeah,
There's no space.
yeah,
That's why everything ends up down there. And then what about the fact that that piece of property is our emergency generator facility? That's staged and ready for emergency generation again if we lose power again.
right.
They can
Right,
bring
but that's up in the
generators in.
front, right? That's where they're
in the
doing the
back.
parking?
Back.
Oh, it's in the back, okay.
To the back.
I don't know. What do you suggest?
Well, either find
I
out
mean,
the
because we need to
property.
put something in here.
Right. I mean, as a former highway superintendent,
Yeah.
I'd fight this tooth and nail to not lose that piece of property.
Right, right, right.
Because a tremendous amount of stuff happens on that property. You want to build Grand Mountain Causeway again? It all got staged on that piece of property. Any major project, the cable that came across, all that stuff got staged down there. So every major project that happens is staged on that piece of property.
I'm surprised I'm just hearing about it now.
I understand. I've said this to numerous people.
How many acres are back there, Jay? Like,
We need a second area to have.
Yeah, we need it,
staging,
yeah.
including the parking lot?
And what that is, we don't know what it will be. but
I think you have a better idea.
I think we have to buy
Parking lot,
megas.
probably 3 if you cut wetlands out.
But no, we need
Yeah.
to, so it needs to go in land use chapter. What needs to go in is a recommendation for replacing that if we're gonna use it for housing.
And there aren't 3 acres to be found around the highway, the new highway barn,
They have the old lot that was in the front and center.
right?
That's kind of a low collection area, so you could put maybe the police impound area right in the front there.
4.28,
But
4.12.
there's not a lot of space.
Right.
And what about the skateboard park?
Sure, you can stack all this stuff out in front of everybody if you want to see it. I mean, you can do that. But, I mean, it seems like every time somebody does something on the road, everybody's complaining that you can see it.
Oh.
So, I mean, you can do that.
Yeah, yeah. There are no other options and you have to
Wasn't there a
rebuild.
lot that was for sale right next to this town lot at one point? I thought Charlie had a lot back there that was for sale, 4 acres or so.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that. But not for us to, just for us to recommend.
understand.
Yeah. And a full 4 acres is what you're saying is needed.
Well, you got the impound. Well, 3,
3.
yeah.
Well, I mean, because that's.
We never
what
really
add
use
to
the
that
front.
3-year, yeah.
But everything from that, on back, we use.
I think that can lead to a much bigger conversation on consolidation of assets and buildings,
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
Um,
Land use.
Certainly don't have everything figured out. I like the idea of setting a requirement on the lot sizes. I think that's a very real concern that people have. It's important to make that guarantee that should something like that happen, all of a sudden, it's not going to be density. I think that's important.
Yeah, yeah.
For affordable housing stuff, it's a supply and demand issue. So that's difficult. And then one thing that does concern me as well is kind of this just opportunistic, whatever comes up, comes up. It kind of way it's how to have to start out,
Yeah,
but long term, is that what we want to see as our affordable housing units spread all over wherever we can grab them?
right. Or do we?
Maybe that's a reality. Like I said, I don't have an answer. It is a concern though.
Well, the other, if we do have infrastructure, I guess that's open for discussion with here and with the community. 2 units per acre, let's just use that as a
Well,
baseline.
you have to define,
could
you
what-
have to define unit a little bit, because we're talking about a unit. What is
It's
a unit?
essentially a house and an accessory
Is
is
it
what
a
you're
four,
talking
is it a
about.
4-bedroom? Is it a 6-bedroom? Is it an 8-bedroom? Because you haven't defined unit yet,
Yeah, we don't really define that
you know
anywhere.
what I'm saying?
in our code.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Jay.
What's the
So,
Department of Health gonna allow, how many bedrooms on
No,
it?
this is a talk of what I'm trying to zero in on is we have infrastructure, so the Department of Health is no longer going to protect with their.
well, I mean, if you have public water, you still need to put a septic system on the property.
Right.
So you may not have a well septic setback, but you're gonna have a septic to all the neighboring well setbacks. So if you, I mean, not everybody is gonna end up on public water or on sewer. So most of the zoning is gonna stay. It's just these areas, if you have the potential, like, let's just say 114 ends up with public water. So a lot of that is, business area. It already has undersized lots. So you wouldn't really want to get more dense than what you have. So what we have now is a lot of primary residence with an accessory building. So an accessory building can only have 2 bedrooms by code. So your primary residence can be whatever your primary residence can be, if it can meet setbacks and if you can fit the sanitary and if you have, so there is no bedroom restriction per acre. It depends on what kind of infrastructure you can fit and whether you can meet setbacks without variances.
Right. So what you just said, though, it's the 2-bedroom limit is for an accessory apartment, but accessory sleeping quarters can be bigger, right?
No, I believe
No?
it's still 2 bedrooms.
All right.
We're getting ahead of ourselves with this recommendation. Isn't that supposed to be in the next chapter? This is more of a zoning question, right?
It is. This is a little
We're
bit.
talking about density and land use,
The reason they threw it in here,
housing.
yeah,
I mean, they're, they are tied at the hip.
It kind of goes in both, which is
Zoning
why,
comes first, right?
Right.
the zoning kind of controls the housing.
Right.
So the reason why they put it in here is because of the concern that they were hearing about wastewater treatment and things like that.
It's a
And,
legitimate concern. I just
Yeah.
I don't think it belongs in this chapter.
yeah. And it can definitely go into the zoning chapter. But I think they were trying to capture some of the concerns
idea.
along with the recommendations in housing, which was, apartments over businesses and that whole concept. So I'll make a note that maybe this belongs in.
Either way, it's a good discussion.
Oh, yeah, no, it's definitely going to be a good
I
discussion.
think it's so meaningful for what this island will be in 10 or 20 years.
Okay, the next one is monitor the effectiveness of the short-term rental law and make necessary code adjustments to increase enforcement ability and renter safety. The short-term rental law was adopted to address various concerns and challenges associated with the growth and management of short-term rentals. This includes concerns about impacts to neighborhood character, such as noise disturbances, turnover of occupants, safety and building standards, code enforcement, and taxation. Short-term rentals can also have an impact on the housing market by reducing the amount of affordable housing options. The town should monitor regulations and enforcement carefully to ensure that short-term rentals contribute positively to the community's well-being while minimizing potential negative impacts. So this is really just monitoring the short-term rentals and enforcement kind of recommendation.
Shouldn't it just be rental law, since we're getting into, like, looking into new ways of dealing with the law, like promoting ADUs, and that's all just rental. I'm just thinking, it's not just short-term rental, it's all of the kind of renting now.
Yeah.
And since we're, moving into like safety and doing inspections with owner occupied and long-term rentals and every kind of rental, maybe just make it broader. That'd be my suggestion.
Okay.
I'm also worried about monitoring. Should we put a time limit on monitor every 2 to 3 years? So it isn't just like the general, oh, we should monitor it. But maybe we should look at how many police calls have been made to a short-term rental last year or the year before. Is that something that's ongoing? Was it just a one-time event that precipitated and changed the law and now things have been quiet?
Right.
We really should look at that. We kind of did a knee-jerk response there early on. And I understand there was a lot of sentiment and concern,
Right.
but is it still the same issue?
Right.
I just also want to add to that. So just if we're going to be really accurate and we want this comp plan to be as precise as possible, what John's referring to at the time, there was actually really weak data on the need for the law. We went ahead and did it anyway. It's done, great. But we don't have any statistical evidence that it improved anything. It was just enacted and it's there. But we don't know, like, did the fact that we prohibited people from renting every other week, what did that result in? Like, I want to see a number, like, I don't know, less police calls, less.
I think if you want to look at that, the data is probably there if you look. It won't tell the entire story. I don't think it's possible to tell the entire story, but
Yeah.
that's one metric you could look at, right? The
Right.
calls for disturbances and
Back then they did, and then someone did it again recently, I think. I don't know who it was. Somebody did it again recently, and it was pretty much the same. So I think we should just like, that would be a great goal, is to get some real nice statistical data on it to show that we've like accomplished something. We're not.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a hard thing, but yeah.
Have you guys had a report to the board, at the board level? Lately?
Yeah, so Reed came and, because we've been trying to sort out the short-term rental, like monitoring, like how are you keeping track of the short-term rental licenses and compliance and all that? Because we were using Granicus as the compliance website, and it wasn't doing a very good job. And so the building department proposed that they take it over and do it themselves. So they gave us a presentation on how they are going to go through and maintain compliance, like what they're gonna check on. And when Reed did that presentation, he said they haven't had a significant number of complaints with regards to short-term rentals. So I don't necessarily think that there's an increase in complaints. I haven't gotten that feeling. I don't know if there's been a decrease. I think that there are some people who complain consistently, but.
I also wonder about the accuracy of the statement. They're saying that they limit the number of houses for rent. If you go to actually VRBO site or the other ones.
Airbnb.
Yeah, thank you. The houses that are for rent are very costly, expensive houses.
Yeah.
No average person is going to be able to afford or buy or rent that on a normal thing. So to say that they're stopping people from procuring a home, I really don't know if that's justified. I don't know if we don't have any data or evidence to say that they do.
Right.
We just sort of say, well, it's a gut feeling they must. But if you really look at these houses that are for rent, the number of houses like are modest homes, I counted 5
Right,
out of 100 and some odd.
yeah.
The rest are on the water, big palatial houses with pools, tennis courts. So no one's going to afford to buy that
Doesn't that,
or rent it.
or rent it year-round?
Yeah.
But doesn't that contribute, John, to a different community? Just even that every neighborhood has a significant number of hotels now?
Hotels.
These houses are run like hotels.
Well, every 2 weeks you have to, no, that's not.
No, but I mean,
hotel.
if, you're saying, but we're questioning here if even the 2 weeks is worth it.
Well, I didn't go that far.
Oh,
for that.
okay.
I'm just saying that's the way we're living with it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's 2 weeks. So that's not a hotel. A hotel is someone coming every other night or something like that.
Right. Oh, you do think it's significantly different in terms of its impact on character? 2 weeks versus every night? I don't.
Absolutely. You have new cars show up. I mean, you have neighbors anyway. If someone's living there year round, what's the activity level on that street?
Yeah. No, I'm just,
Yeah, that's what you'd have if you say you're going
The
to
thing is,
sell it or rent it.
what you,
Yeah, I'm just
what you
thinking of
also
water
can't,
use,
what you
yeah.
also can't prove is like there are, like in Silver Beach, are some houses that are not rented.
yeah.
They're not rented at all.
Yeah.
But you've got family members, because I can hear them, it's a big
Okay.
deal, but I hear, and they're coming in and out. Every weekend, like another cousin is coming in, their kids, and so how do we control that? I mean, those people, there's new cars in the drive, but they're not renting, so,
Right.
but they still have people coming in and out.
Right.
And then the other thing I
But
thought.
aren't they allowed to do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're not renting, they don't need a license, they're just
Yeah.
renting for family in,
They're living.
I feel like there's a connection to the island then,
Yeah.
Right, but
as opposed to a transient 14 day,
Yeah.
even if you're not renting it every 14 days, you can rent it for a weekend. You just can't rent it next weekend to somebody else.
So what's
This
the impact on the community then?
even
It's
worse.
empty for,
Yeah,
all these days and you have just a busy weekend.
yeah.
Well,
There's
that was
no-
my
no
point, is saying
change in
that
character.
you need data to beef this up. You need some sort of evidence. And then the other thing I thought of too was that, so, I am a licensed real estate agent. I try to help people all the time find rentals. And the other thing I encounter, I started to think of like just some families that I've helped like rent their house before. A lot of them want to use their house. Like they want to be in their house like 2 weeks in August. They want to be there at Christmas. They want to be there maybe on Easter. So the problem that we always run into is the owners are totally open to the idea of giving the rental during the winter or maybe even a couple months. But I can't ask that tenant then to just get out, when they want to come back in. So the other issue is that a lot of these houses, they are second homeowners and they're living somewhere else, but they still want to access their home. So how can we it doesn't matter how much the town board, strong arms, and we can't make them get out of their house. Like, if they wanna come back, they're gonna come back. So then where do I put these tenants? I have no place, I can't do it. So that's a constant problem. And the people I was trying to think of, they've done Airbnb, they've also done real estate, rentals, and they've rented themselves, just to friends and family and stuff. So how do you solve that issue of they're still wanting access to their own house? So I don't know, like, I disagree actually with this, that short-term rentals can also have an impact on the housing market by reducing the amount of affordable housing options.
We don't have data on that. Unless we have data to back it up, I think we should exclude it or find the data, one or the other.
I feel like this is like an internationally acknowledged fact.
But
BJ,
go
I'll ask
look
the-
at these
yeah,
houses
I'll ask
and
the-
see what they're
yeah.
like. They're really fancy, elegant homes.
Right.
The average person is not gonna.
well, I'm
buy
saying,
average
what you
house.
just said surprised me, that it was only 5.
I could only find five,
available.
what I would call modest.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think I think in the beginning of the Airbnb boom, and this is like, I'm gonna say, someone can maybe, like, when did that start? 5, 6 years ago, 8 years ago?
Decade.
A decade.
Yeah.
Like, as that started, that's when I think the real effect on, I can't rent someplace because they want their rental available in the summer to Airbnb it. So they're not gonna rent it, year round. And that's the loss of the rental
Yeah.
for the rental market here on the island for people that are looking for rentals.
But that happened a decade ago.
But I'm saying, like, as it hit, and so it took a while for the effect to be felt. But now, as I think, John, what you're seeing is, as we've moved on in this path of Airbnb and VRBO and all these other things, it's grown to something much more, because now if people want to come here for the plush house, this is a whole different market, which I'm sure as a real estate person, you're seeing.
And I've also lost a lot of inventory because after COVID, a lot of these folks that were doing Airbnb and other sorts of rentals, they're staying home.
Yeah.
So I think I had like 6 rental properties that just came off. Like, the owner said, I'm not doing it this year because they're home, working from home.
Right, so I think there's a little bit of truth in, like, what everybody's saying. And I just think it's just that because it's something that has been happening over a long period of time. And, with everything, the variables change a little bit. So, if I can say it, I've had a number of kids living on this island, and that rental market has affected our household and how we've lived here for a long time. And, that's what I can throw in there, so.
And also, I think that people used to rent like quite short term, like just weekends a lot, when everyone had to be reporting to work. So all those families could only come out for a weekend to Shelter Island. Now they're able to take their work with them. So they're renting like 2 weeks. Let's say, they rent a home for 2 weeks. It's not a problem anymore because they're just taking the work with them.
Yeah. Or it could be
So
two.
that's definitely been a change.
Huge
Yeah, but the town
difference.
forced the 1 or 2 week minimums. I think some people would only come for a weekend, but the town's forced, you have to rent it for a week, I believe, or 2 weeks, right?
No, you can get a license and then you can still do your weekend, but I'm talking
person
about.
renting your house doesn't have to rent it for the full 2 weeks. It's just like, if you own your home, you can only rent it this many times, like once every 2 weeks, for whatever duration, but in 2 weeks, you can only rent it once.
But that's what I was saying, maybe just change it to like a full rental law with, code enforcements and safety, inspections and all that you just added in recently.
That way we're not
That will
just
cover
so-
that'll cover everything.
Right, and that way we're not.
Rent your home for a month, you still should be inspected and have it checked out.
That's what the new law says, all
Right,
rental
exactly.
needs to be registered and inspected. So
It's nuanced.
So but first prove it, that's what I have here, like as a close thing, prove this housing market reduces the amount of, that.
Yeah.
And I think there has to be stuff out there we have a consultant for. And then have the discussion again, maybe, after we have some clearer data, right? Okay.
I think it's possible to get that on, which registered on the GIS, you can see it on the map.
I mean, it changes.
Yeah, but it
But at least
that's
we-
one thing we
let's
just
see a
heard.
snapshot.
Yeah, we've heard that a lot though about Shelter Island, the odd thing, people on the, on the Airbnb and then pulling it or blanking out weeks, kind of what you were saying, for their own use or the family's use.
Yeah.
So that would be, is it rented if they just rented for a couple of weeks in August to get
Well,
that?
let's see what a year it's, if you rented during the year, let's see that on the GIS map. If you're.
You get it, right?
It's not on there now. We'd have to have someone collect that
Yeah, and
information.
that- the registry is weak.
GIS. It's not in there now. I mean, we could get the registry information,
The chart in there that says how many.
the building department.
Who's
Yeah.
unregistered and all the other stuff, that's on the, it's in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, we know how many licenses have been issued.
right,
We just don't have it on the map.
right.
Wait, couldn't Jay just go to like Airbnb and
Oh.
Shelter Island? And yeah, you can just,
Map comes up.
yeah, just put it up and you'll see little house tag.
Pensacola, so why not?
I would just do that.
How much they want, like, for every one of them, you know?
And because it's such a small town, you know all these houses.
Yeah, that's the other thing, I'd be very careful of though, don't get thrown off, but they oftentimes include houses in Greenport and Sag Harbor.
Southold, Cutchogue.
In Shelter Island, just state general environs, unless you have the actual address there, you don't know. Unless you recognize the house, which is, I do, 'cause that's why I went and did that looking to see how many there were, and I ran where that house is, and where that one is.
Yeah.
That one's, that's Sag Harbor.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
But you gotta be careful.
All right, so goal number 2, they had provided for a more diverse range of year-round housing options across income, household size, and age groups. So consider allowing second floor apartments above retail and business zones B and B1. This is a recommendation in the housing plan. Of course, we all know that we don't have a lot of businesses in B and B1. It's kind of like a dream.
Two-bedroom apartment up here, is that the plan?
Up here, right here. I'd love to put 2 offices up there so that we didn't have people stacked on top of each other. Maybe over there. All right, so consider allowing second floor apartments above retail and business zones B and B1. Allowing for apartments in the town's business zone can offer several benefits and contribute to the vitality and livability of a community. Allowing apartments potentially on the second floor of retail spaces allows for a wider range of housing options, including affordable units. Utilizing upper floors is also an effective way to focus around existing infrastructure such as roads and create additional housing units without significantly altering the town's character or landscape. Allowing for apartments can also help to promote the revitalization of underutilized or vacant buildings and can provide long-term financial stability with a year-round income. The town may consider tax incentives to make such apartments affordable. However, it is important to consider potential changes and mitigate any negative impacts. Adequate infrastructure, septic and water, access management, parking provisions, and appropriate zoning regulations should be in place to ensure compatibility with the surrounding area. This would include limitations on signs and lighting.
Why wouldn't this also include sort of our office buildings?
Well, that's the thing with B and B one zones. That's why they listed those specifically, because that would include the office buildings, the, some of those more vacant
This is all a
buildings.
dream.
It
It's a
is.
dream for the future. Somebody buys
But this is supposed to be a 10-year
space.
plan,
Yeah,
if
somebody-
you make, if the properties have other abilities than what they currently do, because right now, the B and B1 zones are pretty restricted in what kind of business, like, there's supposed to be professional offices in that zone. Well, we don't have that many professionals who need an office space, like that kind of office space, which is why some of these places have been vacant. Some of it's a landlord, but some of it's just that we don't have a need for that. So maybe if we open up what you're allowed to have there, then it would provide different types of businesses to come in, maybe not just professional office space. So that's kind of the consideration of
Additional
zoning.
incentive to help, cut your costs or supplement.
Well, and also if someone's allowed to have an apartment over their business, then maybe they could live above their business and that would help people do both, live here and
I
have.
think the single biggest thing we can do, and the 94 plan suggested that as well, is to create affordable housing to keep people on the island, is to get them jobs,
Exactly,
year-round jobs,
right.
which is much easier said than done. But if you bring one business to the island that's almost better than, building several houses.
Yeah, or just as impactful.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, in that comp plan, they almost predicted what was gonna happen post-COVID with everyone working at home technology, because they mentioned technology and bringing in maybe like a big company that can provide like data entry work.
Yeah.
And it was like they were forecasting.
Right.
Don corn runs, knew what he was doing. Okay, well, there you go.
I have a question, so as it stands right now, this would be something that would have to be officially put into legislation, like, right now, you can't just put
Correct.
up, right, okay, you can't put it above, I
So
don't know,
it-
the deli or
It
something,
would
right?
have to be a change in the zoning law, because right now you're not allowed to do that in the B and B one zones. They're pretty restrictive on what they can do. You have to get a special permit for it, and people tend to avoid that. I mean, do people feel positive towards this, or how do people feel about this consideration?
I think it's a good
Yeah, I
idea.
think it makes sense, you know,
I'm skeptical whether it's gonna happen or not, but
Right.
I think it's a good capability.
I mean,
Throw it out
skepticism
there.
is real.
Yeah.
I think it's,
but if somebody bought Calabra's
Right.
stores and did whatever, redid them.
Yeah.
and put
Can't be like that
your-
forever.
Yeah.
no, so it'd be nice to have an
It'd
option.
be nice to come through the center of town at 7 o'clock at night and see lights and a little bit of
Right, yeah,
action.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is Main Street Sag Harbor. It's all retail on the bottom and homes above.
Same thing.
Yep.
I mean, that's what this type of plan's supposed to look at. Think about the future and what has to happen. And just like what Sean said, we have to think about how will people survive and how do you bring jobs and housing and.
I mean, I'd like to see a little building like that in the lot
Yes.
between the library and the liquor store.
And that's what this allows for, because right now, like, nothing can happen
Right now,
there, really.
you can't do that.
Is it the zoning chapter that would specify, as far as like general look, like you go to Southampton, it's all like cedar shingle, or
So-
you go to, some places it's all
We
brick
could recommend
base.
an architectural
Is-
review board or
is
some sort
that-
of thing.
That would be architectural review board, so it
Yeah.
would be like a zoning, you'd have to
Right, just for
create.
B1B or BB.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and there's some basic guidelines in the BB1 zoning on what you are supposed to have. So it doesn't necessarily promote like flat roofs, it promotes more of an angled roof, 35-foot maximum height, so two-story structure, same as our basic zoning, to kind of
wanna
restrict it
provide,
that way.
A certain sense and feel for your downtown area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that our last consultants brought that up a lot.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to do something like that, you'd either need to kind of set those requirements in the law or have an architectural review board that reviews applications and, kind of
And
guides
so
the
we would
aesthetic.
just say, make sure the look is good. You figure it out, future. It should be in keeping with the character, but if you think about it, Bridge Street, which is very charming, has this hodgepodge of flat roofs, boats on roofs.
Very eclectic.
It just, but it was organic, it came about, and so it's really quaint.
Yeah, the problem is the septic there.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying the look, just the look that to try to recreate that in the center, we won't be able to. We'll have to be, saying no flat roof, otherwise it will look.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, but where does this happen again? So,
I would say
they
from
starting
here to
from
IGA.
Jasper this way?
Say from here to IGA. I don't know, I don't know what.
the B1 zoning is, so it's essentially the 114 corridor
Right.
from
Oh, right.
Bert Waif's house
Around
all the way
corner,
down
yeah.
to IGA.
Right.
Down the four corners as well? Is that B, or is that all just,
See,
I think that's C zone. I think it only goes down.
What's the four corners?
I'm sorry, West Neck and Nyack?
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
down there, it's a possibility.
I don't even know if it goes down to the Historical Society. It goes down by slice.
I'm C-zone.
You're C zone, right?
Yeah, my father's
I
C-zone.
think it stops at Smith Street.
I'm seeing down Winthrop.
Right, well, you're also across from the Deer and Harbor Inn.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is establish code and policy regarding the development of. So accessory dwelling units are secondary housing units on a single-family residential lot. They can be established through the construction or retrofitting of an additional detached structure through an addition that is attached to an existing structure or within a portion of an existing structure such as the upper story of a residence. ADUs benefit homeowners, renters, and the community by creating more housing options while maintaining the character of a single-family residential, suburban, and rural communities. For homeowners, a code-compliant ADU can provide additional source of income, flexibility for multi-generational housing, and an increase in property value. When developing this program, the town should target outreach to seniors, better understand housing needs for this growing population on the island. The town should re-examine the regulations to find ways to promote ADUs for year-round residents while restricting their use as short-term units. For example, the town may consider allowing ADUs by special permit in residential zones. Conditions could include minimum lot size, width, and depth to ensure sufficient room for off-street parking and other infrastructure needs. Some municipalities require the principal owner to live in either the single-family unit or the accessory apartment. The non-principal owner must be a full-time resident or be employed in Shelter Island. This issue requires further study and analysis. So they have some other additional questions. So what else are we saying here? Some requirements to consider that have been considered in other places. A minimum of 400 square feet of livable floor area. We have a different standard in our code. It's larger than that. 480. A separate entrance, but only one entrance may face the street. One off-street parking space per additional bedrooms. A special permit process, perhaps from the town board. Important to focus on accessory requirements and permits. Do not make process overly cumbersome, as it is a burden for many people, many property owners to upgrade and, include accessory dwelling units. So those are some, that's standing out.
That's happening, right? That's
Yes.
happening right now.
Yes.
They got a grant for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the role of that in the comprehensive plan? It's something we've accomplished in a way.
Well, and so the reason it's in here now is because it is in the housing plan. And the grant is something that just came through. Without the grant, it wouldn't be moving like that. We wouldn't have the funding source to help people with the ADUs. So this is kind of some guidance on, things that we should consider with the ADUs. As of now, people are allowed to construct them as of right if you have 1 acre. And if you're not in the near shore, overlay, then you're not allowed an accessory apartment, you're allowed accessory sleeping. So you can't have a full kitchen. That's the only caveat to that. So these are some things that they're recommending that we just take into consideration with regard to our code, because our code may not really cover ADUs extensively. So things that they've come in, like minimum square footage for an ADU, you don't want someone in a closet. Separate entrances. So aesthetically, do you want a home to have 2 front doors, or do you want one to be around the side so you don't really see it? It just looks like one house. Kind of things like that to consider, like off-street parking. In the Heights, do you have enough space for off-street parking? Would it be appropriate to have, additional accessory dwelling units if there's no place for the people to park? Things like that to consider. And then, should it require a special permit process? For me, I don't think so. If it's an as of right, if you have that acre and you can legally do it, I don't see why you would need a special permit to do so. But I mean, if you can't make it work, then maybe you would need a special permit because you're requesting variances from the ZBA. But then that already has a structure. So.
You're just looking at adding more restrictions to the current.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, I think
Really?
it's,
Yeah.
To help give it a little more direction.
I think that's kind of what the recommendation is showing. Conditions for minimum lot size, width, depth. If you have a substandard lot, can you fit it and fit it with all the
A lot of that
existing
stuff already exists
setbacks?
now.
A lot of it does
Yeah.
exist. And I think it's kind of covered already.
Are we possibly gonna think about like zoning changes? I mean, that would be the zoning and the land use chapter, I guess, more than this, right?
Yeah, that would be more of a zoning change. Like if you're thinking of like near shore overlay, changes there with restrictions. Right now, you can't have an ADU in the near shore overlay. You can just have accessory sleeping. So a change in that would be a change in zoning.
It says establish code and policy regarding, so we already have a policy in the code regarding this, so we'd just be revising our current one.
Right.
Yeah.
Have they,
Or
how
maybe,
much time have they spent going through our current
I don't know that they've done extensive work on our current code regarding this. This was more from the housing plan. So maybe it's more, review current code and policy regarding ADUs and make sure that it's comprehensive.
Yeah, make sure it's,
In keeping with current requirements or, that general idea.
And this is already done, this is what we just did. Promote ADUs for year-round residents. We just said that's all you can rent an ADU for. We did that last month. We took the ADUs off the short-term rental market. So I'm just gonna strike that. It's already done.
So in some ways, this recommendation may not even be necessary.
It's just, like Sean said, though, do you want to get stricter in the regulation of them? Like, only one door can face the street.
But what about having these things in areas on the island that really don't have the water to support it?
Right, right.
Well, I mean, that would be the near shore overlay and they're already not allowed in the near shore.
Okay.
So it's already restricted there.
Right.
At the meeting that I went to for the ADUs, and that there's gonna be one tomorrow too. What's tonight? But they're talking about, they're talking about this, that, you're gonna add just one extra bedroom on your house for this, which is a bedroom and a bath and a kitchen. It's really not much. And, if you have an existing small house, if you upgrade your septic system anyway for your house, this can be sized to fit. So they're looking at all that kind of infrastructure part and with a well support and stuff like that. So they're not like planning to put on 3 bedrooms to an existing house or build a 3-bedroom house. They're talking 1, maybe 2 bedrooms at the top.
Right.
So they're thinking small,
And they're,
which could be fit in a lot of places.
But also what's funny is that in the nearshore overlay, you can get a special permit, and build a 6,000 square foot and 4 bathrooms, but you can't put an ADU in and help somebody live. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, that's what we,
Yeah.
that, for now, yeah.
except maybe the people who work for you, who are living above the garage in a separate apartment.
Exactly.
All year round.
Right, exactly,
Again, they're distinctions without a difference.
I know, so.
But without a kitchen because it's only accessory sleeping.
No,
So instead you
have a
have
kitchen.
induction,
Yeah,
you just.
Yeah.
But they are, Liz Hanley from the Community Housing Board was here on Tuesday, and she just said that, that she didn't mean to stir a tempest up in the teapot by bringing up the idea of possibility of talking about ADUs in the nearshore overlay, but she did say that she would like to talk with the community housing, with the water committee, Water Advisory Committee, maybe WQI, and talk just to see, let's examine it with some, just new ideas. IA systems now exist.
There were people in the last meeting that I'm interested, that's where I live.
Yeah.
These people have the money, they're ready to go forward and do this, but, that's probably the impetus for her to do this.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like a lot of the people who are interested in doing it, the people I've spoken to, have smaller homes. They have like a 3-bedroom house and they want to add another apartment, so it's like a 4-bedroom home. You have how many 6-bedroom, 7-bedroom homes in that area? What's the difference if you're just adding 1 bedroom and a bathroom?
Right.
It's something to consider, but I think.
And then in the nearshore overlay, you do tend to get these big properties,
Yeah. There are big properties here.
2 acre, 3 acres on,
On the water, because that's where people want to be.
The two, where on the water though, there's a difference between the Hay Beach on the water and a difference between Silver Beach and Shorewood on the water.
True.
Briefly, I just want to go back to the business zone apartments. I just pulled up the zoning map. B1 does include everything basically from Bob's Fish Market all the way to St. Mary's Traffic Circle on both sides of the street.
That's B1.
And then all the way down, basically following 114 down to the medical center, both sides of the street. So when you're talking about letting apartments above buildings, that includes all those other lots. It's not just.
No, this is.
Not just
Stretch
this
here.
little stretch, it goes all the way down.
Yeah.
There used to be a regulation or rule, anything in this area had to be a brick front to kind of keep with the Georgian brick look we had. That's not obviously there are buildings that aren't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that didn't seem to take.
When Evans Griffin was in charge, that's what he wanted.
I don't know if that's what he got in the end.
No, but it's bittersweet here. Thank you, Evans.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna just kind of make the recommendation that this change to just reviewing the current code and policy regarding ADUs to make sure that it kind of covers some of these topics. All right. The next one, develop educational materials and resources to assist and educate homeowners in the process of developing ADUs on their property. Educational materials play a crucial role in helping homeowners develop ADUs by providing them with the necessary information, guidance, and resources. These materials would provide, at minimum, a summary of the approval process, including relevant zoning regulation, building codes, permitting process, size restrictions, parking requirements, and any other relevant guidelines. Clear and accessible education materials help homeowners navigate the regulatory landscape, ensure compliance with legal and safety standards, and help to create well-designed and functional ADUs that meet their specific needs. In addition, educational materials can provide guidance on the following: design and construction, so design ideas, architectural guidelines, and construction best practices for ADUs, financing and cost considerations, information on financial options, available grants or incentives, and cost estimation guidelines, and management and rental considerations, so guidance on tenant selection, lease agreements, property management, and local rental regulations. I kind of feel like the Community Housing Board is covering this.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
working on this right now.
Yeah,
The information they're passing out to people is very, very
Very
thorough.
yeah. Maybe, you know, this all could be more stated in the idea of continue, you know, continue with, and then, and expand where necessary, you know, continue with and as necessary. Okay. Again, this is sort of lifted, I shouldn't say lifted, but it is right in our housing plan. And the next two ones as well.
Yeah, so then the next is establish a funding source such as grants and low-interest loans to encourage homeowners to develop year-round accessory dwelling units. The town should work with other partners to establish funding sources to help homeowners overcome financial barriers of creating additional housing options, provided they can meet the requirements of town zoning and Suffolk County Department of Health Services. Some options include government grants and subsidies, low-interest loans in partnership with financial institutions, tax incentives, and housing trust funds. The town could work with Suffolk County Department of Health to provide grants that support the installation of IA septic systems to meet current wastewater standards. One grant recently received was the ADU +1 grant. The program pairs the Community Housing Board with a CDCLI to issue grants up to $125,000. So this is kind of describing what's currently happening with the ADUs and just other ways we can do it, kind of in continuing the education process. And then the next is in the community housing plan already, that you have to update the community housing plan every 5 years. So the comp plan includes recommendations from community housing plan. The recommendations in that plan provide an overall roadmap of the vision for the community housing on Shelter Island. Comprehensive plan supports recommendations made in the community housing plan, even if they are not specifically cited within this comprehensive plan document. As the community housing plan is implemented and updated over time, its objectives should also be revisited and revised as appropriate to reflect the most recent conditions and housing demographic trends. It is recommended that the plan be revisited every 5 years with the following updates. Update housing needs assessment, conduct public outreach to understand current public opinion and priorities for community housing initiatives, and evaluate progress in creating community housing, fund availability, and potential refinements to the program administration and priority expenditures. So that's just the comp plan saying housing plan has to be reviewed every 5 years.
Dinner?
Candy.
Drive,
I have a back here too.
okay.
So does anyone have a problem with the comp plan saying that the housing plan needs to be revised every 5 years?
Are there any requirements that already say that?
The
Is
housing,
that state?
The housing-
Like, is that the state county dictated
Well,
anyway?
the housing plan itself states that, and it's recommended that it be
No problem.
reviewed. So, I mean, it's compliant.
Let's move on.
Goal 3.
Goal 3.
Create and maintain affordable and workforce housing opportunities for the diversity of age and income groups that make up Shelter Island's year-round population for those that work on the island. So, support creation of a Shelter Island Land Trust to assist with acquisition and management of land for continuing community housing. Land trusts offer sustainable and community-driven approach to managing open space and community housing. By preserving land, promoting conservation, and ensuring long-term affordability, land trusts contribute to the environmental, social, and economic well-being of communities, both in the present and for future generations. While the land trust would be an independent nonprofit agency, it would collaborate with the municipality, county, and other nonprofits and community organizations to leverage resources, secure funding, and implement joint conservation and housing initiatives. This collaboration fosters a sense of shared responsibility and builds a collective commitment to the long-term success of open space and community housing projects. Other benefits of the land trust are listed below. Affordable housing. Land trusts can acquire land and hold it in perpetuity while partnering with affordable housing organizations to develop and manage affordable housing units. This approach helps ensure long-term affordability for low and moderate income individuals or families, promoting socioeconomic diversity and addressing housing affordability challenges. Residential control and community engagement. Land trusts often involve residents in decision-making process, allowing them to have a say in the management and governance of community housing. The resident control empowers the community and fosters a sense of ownership and stability. And permanent stewardship. Land trusts ensure that community housing remains permanently affordable by holding the land and enforcing resale or lease restrictions. They monitor compliance with affordability requirements and provide ongoing support to residents, including maintenance and property management services. So a land trust is helpful if we're able to get to a position where we can purchase properties, build starter homes on them, and then people have the opportunity of purchasing those starter homes, and then they can sell them essentially back to the land trust, and they can be sold again as another starter home. So it kind of maintains the affordability of that home while allowing someone to have home ownership. And land trusts make that possible because the land that the home is built on stays in the trust. So it's kind of a nice way to promote community housing, but also giving people that
Some
foothold.
opportunity to build equity.
Exactly.
How would the town government support that, though? It's going to be run by some sort of not-for-profit. It's a good idea, but how does the
They
town
kind of
support
work
that?
hand in hand with the town and the county and,
Just
you know,
offering
it's,
informational resources, like, what's that relationship?
Do any of the other East End towns have such a thing?
I believe so,
Yeah.
yeah. East Hampton and Southampton both do. Well, because we have the community housing fund and we have the monies in the housing fund, we can use those monies to purchase things and like through the land trust or with the land trust. So
Like one of those
we can find
public-private
it.
partnerships?
Right. It would be like when you purchase something with the Peconic Land Trust, you know, it's town money going in with,
Specified purpose.
exactly.
So I'm gonna assume, so we'd have our own little land trust, something just like Peconic Land Trust, but not
Right.
using Peconic Land Trust. So we'd
Yes.
have our land trust, the town, the county, all three
Right.
working
It
together.
would be like Shelter Island specific land trust. And they would work with the town, they would work with the county, and their whole job would be housing. So whether it's housing for first-time home buyers to get their, you know, first home, or if it's managing rentals on this land trust property. So that would kind of just be their job.
I know it's getting late.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to play devil's advocate on that one or not.
Yes, go for it.
Go for it.
I mean, if you have a land, it's a nice idea, but if they're gobbling up all these extra properties, what if someone else wants to buy that property and maybe they don't meet the criteria of the land trust or something like that? You know, it's the kind of the argument of the CPF, you know, buying up all the vacant land, you know, it's taken away from the housing. So again, it's a kind of a supply and demand.
Right. Well, it's also the kind of thing where you can get people who donate their land to the land trust.
Right.
You can have
Like if I
them
want to
take
move to the
over.
island, or my kids want to move back to the island, but maybe whatever the criteria that the land trust has, maybe they have a job in Greenport
Right.
Yeah.
and it's a good job and they're not going to quit their job
Right. To purchase a
to
home.
purchase a home, but they want to live here, so they don't meet the criteria, but land trust has a lot of resources and it's going to buy those, entry-level market type places.
Yep.
I don't know if either one of the land trusts on the other side force you to live in the town. Not sure, force you to
Well,
work.
that's what this, this is such a draft and it's a new idea.
Yeah.
But
No, I mean, it
it
would have
suggests that
significant.
in here that they would have to work on Shelter Island. So there's going to be certain criteria that you're going to have to establish.
Well, and there would be certain criteria for any of the rental properties or the purchasing properties anyway through the town. So that, that criteria would probably match itself,
To
like,
keep families, young people, and also seniors, in the community in.
I think it's a good idea that should be explored with them being mindful of who you're excluding and maybe some unintended consequences of that. Hopefully consultants will have a little more experience in that and can offer some good feedback on.
And we can
Well,
also-
Sean's bringing up a really good point. You can build a community in Shelter Island, but there's only so many jobs on Shelter Island that not everybody works here and lives here. We do commute off the island and come back at the end of the day to live here. So,
Right.
like, when we think about all of these things and criteria, it can't just be that you have to work on the island in order to qualify for something.
Right.
Because that is not the way the
Yeah, I
world
think-
works. That's being a very,
It also means that if you
Exclusionary.
changed, it's like
Yeah.
tied to housing. If you changed your job, would you have to give up your,
That would be.
Sell
Especially
your
with
house.
the world of telework and everything
Yeah.
now.
right.
I don't know, just poking
No, it's a good concern to bring up.
interesting
It
idea.
is. It is interesting. And I'd be interested in seeing how Southampton and East Hampton handle it,
Yeah.
how theirs functions. So that's something that we'll look up. I want to say we're almost done.
The other options over there too.
They
right?
do. They actually have a ton of community housing. They've
Done a
really
good job.
done a
What I'm
lot.
saying about senior housing though, and I really think this is an unmet need. There's senior co-housing, it's called, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's expanding all throughout the country, and it's just a matter of several seniors moving in together. And
Right.
I guess it's not going to preclude anybody from doing that now, but oftentimes the houses are either too small or don't have the proper bathroom facilities, or you need to have a room for an aide to be there also. So it might mean a change in zoning to allow an extra building, an extra bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, whatever, added to a house, provide the services for 3 seniors or 4 seniors in the house.
Yeah.
It makes like a mini nursing home is what it basically idea is. Then you have the whole idea of, do you want that in Soar Beach? Do you want that in Hay Beach?
Right.
But
Well, you can kind of, you can kind of do that with the accessory dwelling units. So you can kind of do that already with,
if the aide is going to be in one of those units, I mean, it depends on how
It would be the main
paid,
house.
are they renting it from the seniors? I mean, it's
right.
Well, they need like an ADU, basically approved for that person.
That was the unrelated people.
right, unrelated people.
That's what that is. That's different.
Well, if they act as a family unit, then they're a family.
Yeah.
So the law, like the definition of a family has changed to the point where if you live together and you act
For more than.
as
Yeah.
you share resources and you act as a family, then you are a family, is how the law now reads.
But if someone came to the town and said, I want to build one of these things, or I want to modify my house, so I have 2 other seniors who want to move in,
I don't think we'd
what do we
have,
do?
I don't think we'd have any problem.
Do you meet building code?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it. That's all it
If you
is.
have the
That would be
extra
the
rooms, I
limitation.
guess you could do
Pardon
it.
me?
If you have the extra rooms, I guess you just could proceed.
Just start doing it.
For everything.
You're allowed, I think, 2 boarders
Yeah.
in a
All these little
residence.
hippies just like, come here, you know?
Yeah.
Wait, and you could put the caregiver in the last bedroom. Let's say there's 3 adults and then the 4th person would,
Yeah.
it'd be basically like a boarding house almost.
well, John, having taken care of many an old person. But those days are coming. And,
Yes.
having now, spending a lot of time at San Simeon and watching all the people from Shelter Island going there, Shelter Island should start thinking about how we care for our seniors in that type of sense.
Right.
And,
Since we're mostly a senior community.
Yeah.
no, we are a senior community, so,
Yeah.
we provide certain senior services here. We used to have, 50 years, my grandmother worked at Bellcrest which was a nursing home here way back in the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, does the future see some type of facility that becomes that kind of small unit? I'm not saying, you know, Peconic Landing, but some type of apartment style or mixed living where an aide can be there, because there is that transitional type style step that we need here
Desperately.
desperately,
Got a lot of old
desperately.
people rattling around in their
Grandchildren can
houses.
come visit, you know, people are going schlepping off Island to go see somebody that's sitting somewhere. It's a good thing to have.
And we could do a much better job
Right.
as to what the options are around here.
Nobody did.
We had that. And we let it slip right through.
Yeah, at St. Gabe's.
Same thing.
Yes, we did.
No vision.
Nobody designs their house thinking about in the future when the ambulance needs to get in there and they're
Oh,
only bedrooms
yeah.
on the second floor. I mean, it's
It's
running.
going down a stretcher on the
I have a
stairs.
bedroom on the first floor. I didn't.
But no, I mean, you know, we have a goal for affordable housing. We don't necessarily specify who that's for. I think you raised a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, senior housing is extremely important.
Yeah.
Do we earmark, you know, a certain number
Percentage of them.
of them for seniors? I mean, obviously you would have to look at,
Because theoretically, you could have two seniors downsizing a larger home, which could then be available then for other people, and they end up moving in with
Right.
the third party.
I think there's some hope for that with the ADU program. And it's explicitly stated that you can move into the ADU, which would be designed for you as a senior, and rent out your bigger home, which might help for the families
Yeah.
trying to stay here.
And another thing, like when we went and looked at Southampton, we did a tour of Southampton's housing program, and they took us to all their different things that they've done. One of the things that they told us was that it was nice to have senior-specific housing, not mix senior housing with, you know, regular family housing, because you can have, you know, a 25-year-old who's up until midnight playing music, and you've got seniors who wanted to go to bed at 7:30, and now you have like a conflict of
There's a sense
living
of community
styles.
there
Yeah,
as
the sense
well,
of
yeah.
community. So, you know, senior-specific housing may be something that we want to recommend to the Community Housing Board, is to look at a site for just that specifically.
Wheel and shower.
Yeah.
I would love to get a group of seniors, go down to the senior center and see what they would like,
What they would like to see.
what their thoughts are, you know? Kind of do a
I mean,
focus
it's-
group.
Yeah, it's not even the people who go to the senior center, they're people who in their early 70s.
Oh, yeah, that's only a
who are
fraction of them, yeah.
starting to downsize in their houses.
Absolutely.
That was in the state plan, Meg. When they talked about the ADU, they specifically mentioned seniors. And I remember it being on the slide, someone went to Association
Yes.
Town, so it's somewhere in there.
Yeah. Senior housing is a big thing.
And it's mentioned here a couple of times in our.
Oh, in our thing.
In here,
Stairs, no.
yeah.
Yeah, no, all first floor apartments, no stairs.
The final,
Access, wide doors.
No,
I
no,
mean, if they're gonna build an ADU, they would make it ADA accessible.
Right.
And then they could live in that and rent the other house. I mean, really, those are the ones we should be going after. That seems like low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah, me too.
all right?
this is the proactive, last thing, proactively identify sites, which is what you were talking about before. Here it is.
Yeah, so then this next one is proactively identify sites and build community housing in appropriate locations. So the town should continue to identify suitable locations for year-round rental housing, considering factors such as water constraints, proximity to amenities, transportation and services. 2 sites identified in the housing plan include the potential for 2 units at 69 North Ferry Road and 8 units at 12 South Ferry Road. In the short term, the town should develop a plan for each site which conforms to Suffolk County Department of Health standards, but is designed in a way that could be expanded if the necessary infrastructure becomes available in the future. Additional guidance on this can be found in the community housing plan. And then they have some other questions. So what else are we saying here? Do you need potential for private-public partnerships? Are there needs to change zoning to encourage development? What's the barrier? So those are just some questions to consider. I think the zoning stuff will kind of do the zoning. And this
But
is,
ideally, isn't there a push by the state to make the community housing accessible to like the railroad and bus service, and we don't have, don't really have that, but that would mean technically it should be in the heights.
So that didn't, the proposed plan that we looked at didn't get put into the
yeah.
budget. But yes, that's what they were looking at.
Who knows, they could substitute Larry.
So goal 4, ensure that new housing construction or conversions of existing housing are sensitive to the natural environment, are of high design and build quality, and are consistent with the general scale of Shelter Island's existing housing and traditional developmental pattern. So limit the development of pre-existing non-conforming small lots in sensitive shoreline areas. Shoreline areas are often ecologically diverse and provide important habitats for various plants and animal species. They are also highly vulnerable to natural hazards such as erosion and flooding. It may be appropriate to adjust zoning standards to limit the size, height, or density of structures near the shore, especially in flood hazard areas, to limit the risk of erosion and flooding, and to preserve the recreational and aesthetic value of coastal regions for future generations. It may also be appropriate to develop criteria for evaluating variances or exceptions to these standards. Thoughts?
Does this get us into the Architectural Review Board territory?
I don't think so much Architectural Review Board as the restriction of the size and encroachment into like wetlands areas is kind of more what I'm reading here. And I think when it says criteria for evaluating variances or exceptions to the standards, that's kind of more like the large house standard. At least that's how I'm reading it. I could be wrong. If someone reads it some other way, let me know and we'll address it, because
We talk about development, you're specifically talking about housing.
yeah, and it's
And
development
structures.
of pre-existing non-conforming small lots in sensitive areas.
Oh, only small lots?
That's what the heading
Makes
is.
sense.
This is all,
Maybe we should use like the 45-degree rule or something.
It's my idea, I mean,
What's a 45-degree rule?
that shouldn't just be small lots.
Yeah, that
you
the
know what I'm
house
saying?
can't be higher than 45 degrees from the street angle going up.
You're gonna say something, Sean? I want.
no, just when you talk about, the intent to limit erosion and flooding, sometimes that requires development of that wetlands area when you're talking about vegetative buffers. And, I'm not saying bulkheads, but, other measures that you can take is currently limited.
Right.
Very limited. You can't really prevent the flooding before it happens because it's so restrictive.
Yeah.
In certain occasions, depending what kind of
But
development.
not only is that, but you can also capture runoff
Before it gets.
before it goes, so you could actually fix it in perpetuity. If you could go in one time and fix it.
Correct.
So what we do is we don't do anything because we don't allow
But
any.
you're not allowed to touch anything, so it's the catch-22.
Yeah.
If you go in one time, raise the elevation, put in the proper vegetative buffers and whatnot, and, essentially fix the runoff problem for many years, but that's, I don't know, maybe that's not included in this.
Yeah, this is,
Probably in another section.
I think it's more in this
Natural.
natural environment
Land
section or the zoning section.
It's in.
This one here is listing specifically for small non-conforming lots. So,
Big lots too?
yeah,
That's what I was thinking, when you said that, not just limited to small.
right. But, I mean, you brought up a different kind of concept here, because this is saying not to touch it, to leave it be and restrict construction from happening in that area, or restrict.
It's your
development.
interpretation of development.
So it's how you're just, infrastructure or, I guess, grading.
Most people think
I think-
structural development.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking about landscape development.
We know this is rough. I think that this goal and the explanation needs to be a little clearer. Don't you? From the consultants? To, just exactly what would this look like, clarity here.
In the end, we want to protect the environment as much as possible.
We do.
Absolutely.
But while respecting some property rights, I mean,
Yeah,
Yep.
Is that,
Yeah, it's the balance.
yeah.
Right. We're almost there, y'all. Goal number 5, identify ways to leverage development and forge public-private partnerships to achieve other community goals such as open space and community housing. Strengthen subdivision ordinances to require land for open space and/or affordable housing. Utilizing subdivisions to require land for open space or affordable housing is a strategy employed by many communities to address the need for preserving natural areas and promoting affordable housing options. This approach involves incorporating specific requirements or incentives within the subdivision development process to allocate land for open space or ensure the availability of affordable housing units. When drafting resolutions, the town must carefully assess and balance requirements to ensure they are reasonable, economically viable, and compatible with the overall development objective. Strategies to consider are listed below.
But we don't do any of that. I mean, we do the open space, but we don't even consider purchasing for housing.
Right. So some of the things that other communities have done are they have a mandatory set aside. So subdivision regulations currently require developers to set aside 10% of land within the subdivision for open space. This land can be used for parks, greenways, trails, and other recreational purposes. The town code should be strengthened so that the town board has more authority in the approval process to select open space land or to refuse inappropriate land offers to satisfy open space requirements. For example, the proposed open space dedication should meet criteria for high priority lands using the priority system used in CPF dedication. In other cases, the town should require developers to pay a fee in lieu of dedication. Green infrastructure. Subdivisions can be designed to incorporate green infrastructure elements such as stormwater management systems, wetlands, or natural buffers. These features not only serve environmental purposes, but also provide open space for residents to enjoy. Right of first refusal. The town should require a right of first refusal on key lands in public or semi-public ownership to permanently assure that the public interest is protected in the event of change of ownership.
And then on that seems to speak to Masonic, right?
I just thought of that.
Right? Yeah.
And then affordable housing. Subdivision regulations can include an affordable housing fee, perhaps for larger subdivisions. The collected fee would be used to fund the creation or preservation of affordable units. The fund would be managed by the local government or a designated housing agency, so that would be the Community Housing Board, and it would go into the housing fund. It could also be used to support various affordable housing programs, which may include the construction of new units, rehab of existing units, down payment assistance, or rental subsidies. So those are things that have been done in other communities. So when you have like a huge parcel that's being subdivided. And we were looking, there aren't too many of those that are still allowed to subdivide, but some do still exist.
Do we have to have under, where is it, for example, the proposed open space dedication should meet criteria for high priority lands. And it says, in other cases, the town should require developers to pay a fee in lieu of dedication.
Yeah,
How
so
about we just do dedication and there's no, you don't.
You can't get out of it.
You can't get out of it.
well, the argument is that
Suggest
you would
like-
take that fee and either buy more open space or community housing.
Or
I know.
housing.
No, I say, no.
Scratch
There's
that?
no way, I personally would scratch that.
I kind of agree with you.
Anyone-
But I
don't
do
know
think
if
that
it's
on-
just me or
on-
anyone else.
On larger subdivisions, which is in land use, but
How much do we?
we should require more of a set aside, 10%.
Yeah, so we currently require 10.
I think it should be like 30% on the bigger ones.
Have other towns done more?
Alcohol.
Really?
Scale it, depending on the size.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, scale it on size, yeah. So we can talk, when we get there.
So minimum now is 4 acres. You can't subdivide it less than an acre, right?
Right, it has to be.
Right,
Right.
Well, and
Looking at
depending on
4 acre
your,
lots and bigger.
yeah, and depending on your area. So if you're double A, it has to be a 2-acre lot. So if you're gonna just
but if
subdivide
you're,
a double
if
A,
you're
you
in a
have to have
single
a
A, you
minimum.
can
right.
subdivide a 3 acre or even a 1 acre, I mean, a 2 acre. Yeah.
So other than that, do any of these sound wacky or? You can think about it and write notes on it later. It's too.
First glance, subdivision not being tied to affordable housing.
My
Yeah,
nephew worked for a company that was building large developments, like 6,000 and 9,000 square foot homes. And we went on a tour, and we were driving through, and he says, "You see that house right over there? He said, and it was the same scale and size as all the other houses. He says, that's the affordable housing for him. It had 3 2,000 square foot apartments inside each of the house.
Wow.
You would never know that that was not one house. It was so well, it was
That's the
so
way
well
to
done.
do it, yeah. it's-
Well, and I mean, that works when you have developers coming in and buying the property and subdividing and developing it. But if you have a homeowner who's subdividing because they want to give, lots to their kids or something, you're not going to get the same kind of development out of it. So you won't end up necessarily with that, but.
I don't-
Fee, then it can go into the bank to,
But the property could go into the bank.
I don't remember where it is, but I'm pretty sure in the original 94 comp plan, they talked about developers and they had to set aside a percentage for community housing. I definitely know it's in there somewhere, I don't know which page, but, and what happened to that?
I do remember that. I
Right?
don't think it was ever established in code because we didn't have any method for collecting. Like, we just created the community housing bank and we just, it didn't exist yet.
Okay.
It was conceptual, but I don't think it ever got codified.
But with that, like, if that was in the old comp plan, that was probably in there for a reason because the people involved felt it necessary, so would that go in here?
No, I think.
Could that go in here?
I think it could, I'm just looking it up.
That would be, which,
Me too, now I'm confused.
that would kind of be like a set aside, but a set aside for community housing, not totally open space, right?
Right.
I'm just trying to think of things that were in there in that spirit, so maybe there are some things we want to carry forward, or.
I'm gonna make a note to look at 94.
I'm not seeing it in there, but.
It was in 2008.
In 94,
No, I
it's
think it's
explore
in the
the,
94 version,
Wasn't also in 2008?
probably.
I think it was.
yeah,
I think it's 2000.
maybe that's where it was. I don't think it's in 90, yeah.
Well, we don't take time to look at it now.
I'm gonna look it up.
Here.
It's getting late, it's getting late.
All right, last one, I promise. Establish a low-interest loan program for first-time homebuyers. So this program would be an effective way for the town to support affordable housing and promote homeownership. In order to set up such a program, the town should consider the following: program parameters such as eligibility criteria, income limits, and other requirements. Sources of funding, which could include local government budgets, grants, partnerships with financial institutions, or leveraging other housing-related programs and resources. Program guidelines that outline the application process, requirements, loan terms, et cetera. Collaboration with local financial institutions to administer the program. Promotion of the program to create awareness, and monitoring to evaluate the program's performance and impact. So that was the recommendation in the housing plan, was to develop a low-interest loan program for first-time home buyers.
What about,
That's a great idea.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think I brought that up before.
Yeah.
Everyone's first question is, what would that look like? Who would manage that?
Right.
right.
Which are important questions.
And that's where you could partner with someone like CDCLI, that's their job, community development of Long Island. They give out grants for housing, like that's their,
They do low interest.
yeah.
In 1994, under the housing implementing actions, it's number 3.
Okay.
So what page is that?
I don't know the page number, but it's identify and implement mechanisms which ensure affordability of housing opportunities for future first-time home buyers, including amending the zoning ordinance to require the share of all new housing developments be permanent.
Ah, and then they didn't do it,
I mean, they didn't do it.
yeah, with our one project.
Right.
so many subdivisions that we had since then.
I'd have to look since 94, that I don't know off the top of my head.
No, but I'm saying for the one we did do, we didn't ensure its
Yeah.
affordability, which is the last,
Right.
wow.
Okay. All right, so this will go into the SharePoint, so you guys can read it, make comments, anything you have, just let us know. And then we will work on zoning next time. I'm gonna undo stop my share, sorry. I'm nauseous.
Just anything that comes to mind on this, email.
Email, put it, you can I'll make it editable in SharePoint. You can make comments on it. And then we'll review it. Anyone in the audience have any comments? All right, Kim Nolan, I see your hand.
Hi, thank you very much, as usual, for all the hard work. I was going to, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was gonna talk about this as well when you talk about zoning, but there was a lot of discussion tonight about ADUs, and I wanted to point out that ADUs are not necessarily affordable housing. And the Shelter Island Association, which represents 10 neighborhoods, wrote a letter to the town board, and I figure Meg and BJ have seen this. I don't know if they passed it along, but our letter on May 23rd has a very strong statement from the neighborhoods that they do not want any change in the zoning on ADUs that are the construction and operation thereof should be continue to be barred in the near shore district. And so that's why I've been listening tonight, because it really has come up as a topic in a bunch of different places. And, you know, I'm not going to read the letter into the record. I will submit it on the website. You know, I think it's available to everyone. And I personally think that given your discussion of goal number 4, which is to protect the environment as much as possible, there actually should be a statement in the comprehensive plan that ADUs are not favored and should continue to be barred in the nearshore district. And you're talking about updating this particular housing plan every 5 years. So, you know, it's not necessary at all now. And in a period of climate change, you know, when you have other options, you should not do it. And I think the comprehensive plan should pretty much recognize what a lot of the residents and neighborhoods want in the community. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody else? No? All right, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? All right.